Freckles, I got so many answers to that question, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Hello, Lost fans across the world. It's me, Seanie B, back after this 2-week break to talk about everything that happened in the 14th episode of Season 6 called The Candidate. Let's just start right off with the Fast Reflex Awards.
And boom goes the dynamite.
Congrats to the 10 of you guys down here. You were the fastest a couple weeks ago, so good job. Now for the very last recap for the Fast Reflex Awards, I'm thinking of having like a prize for the top 5 people, but I'll talk more about that during that recap, so stay tuned. So like I said at the beginning, this episode is called The Candidate, and it's actually referring to 2 different things. It has to do with Locke being the candidate for spinal surgery in the Flash Sideways timeline, and then also refers to Jack in the original timeline being the candidate to take over for Jacob, which I'll talk about at the end of this recap. So like usual with these Season 6 recaps, I'm going to be breaking this recap up into 2 parts as well. The first part going over all the stuff that happened in the Flash Sideways with Jack and Locke, and then the second part going over everything that happened on the island this episode. So here we go. We start off with Locke waking up in the hospital, and Jack tells him about the crash that he was just in, but that he's also a candidate for a new spinal surgery to repair his paralysis. But Locke adamantly says that he doesn't want it, and he leaves with Helen. So Jack visits the dental lab and talks to Bernard, the dentist. Jack asks for Locke's patient file, since Bernard worked on him 3 years prior. When Jack tells him that he wants to know about Locke because they were randomly on the same plane together, Bernard interrupts him and reminds him that both of them were also on the same plane too. He writes down the name Anthony Cooper, claiming that's who was brought in with Locke 3 years ago, and says to Jack, "I hope you find what you're looking for." Maybe Bernard has some knowledge of the original timeline because he's still with his true love Rose, and as we know, in the Flash Sideways, when the Oceanic 815 survivors find their true love / soulmate, it tends to lead to flashes of the original timeline. I mean, look at Bernard here. He seems pretty smug and coy when he's talking with Jack in this scene, and he also seems to remember Locke in his case, even after 3 years from working on him. So Jack goes to the nursing home where Anthony Cooper lives, but he runs into Helen, who brings him to Cooper, and he's a vegetable. If that's not the face of death, I don't know what is. Going back to the hospital, we see Locke sleeping, and he's mumbling phrases like, "push the button," and "I wish you had believed me," obviously phrases from the original timeline. Claire arrives at the hospital, so she and Jack go to the cafeteria, where Jack gets an Apollo bar from the vending machine and offers it to Claire, exactly like Jacob did to Jack when they first met off the island. And she tells Jack that their father, Christian, especially wanted her to have something in his will. She opens it up, and it's a music box that plays the song "Catch a Falling Star" as they see the reflections in the mirror inside the box. Maybe this is Christian's hope to get Claire to realize the original timeline. We know that the song "Catch a Falling Star" played a bunch of times in the original timeline, so maybe this will trigger her memory. And then also with the mirrors, we know that in the Flash Sideways, when people look in a mirror, they get that deja vu sense, like they know something's up. Jack and Claire talk for a bit, and they soon realize that they are both on Flight 815. Just too much for Jack's brain to handle. Jackie Boy's been lonely, so he asks if Claire Bear wants to stay with him. Jack passes Jin in the hallway, and he sees Locke, who's about to leave. He tells Locke about going to see his father, and Locke looks like he wants to explode. After all, it's the trendy thing to do in Lost now.
And boom goes the dynamite.
Locke tells Jack about getting his piloting license and bringing his dad with him to fly, that his dad was scared, but Locke said to trust him, and that they crashed, leading to the vegetative state of his father and his own paralysis. It's funny because in the original timeline, a plane crash caused Locke to regain the use of his legs, whereas in the Flash Sideways, a plane crash caused him to lose the use of his legs. Also on top of that, in the original timeline, Anthony Cooper is responsible for Locke's condition, whereas in the Flash Sideways, Locke is responsible for Cooper's condition. Jack tries to comfort him by saying, "Just let it go, and whatever happened, happened." Locke smiles and starts to head out when Jack yells to him, "I can help you, John. I wish you had believed me," which is the exact same thing that Locke was whispering to himself while he was sleeping earlier, and what he wrote to Jack in his suicide letter in the original timeline. Locke turns around, feeling like what Jack just said was familiar, and then he leaves. Okay, now let's go over everything that happened on the island. Jack wakes up in the outrigger canoe on Hydra Island. Saeed greets him, and the man in black tells Jack that they're gonna save all his friends who were captured by Widmore. He also says once they free them, they should all run for the plane to escape, but Jack says that he won't leave the island. Flock tells Jack that he needs to get all his friends to trust Jack, and that Jack can trust him, because Flock could kill them all anytime he wants to. So we go over to the animal cages where Sawyer, Kate, Hurley, Frank, Sun, and Jen are thrown into. Sawyer, the rebel, decides to cause a scene and hold Seamus at gunpoint, but Widmore comes by and points a gun at Kate, saying it doesn't matter to him if Kate lives or dies because she's not on the list. Now the big question here is, how did Widmore get that list of names? We know from the lighthouse that Kate's name isn't crossed off, so that leaves two possibilities. Either he saw the cave wall where her name was crossed off, or he got the list of names from someone, and I think that someone was the man in black, but I'll talk about that at the end of this recap. Sawyer drops his gun and gets owned by the nerd, as Widmore comes up to him and says he's locking them up for their own good. He then orders his men to get the sonic fence up faster because he's coming. In the cage, Sawyer tells Kate that Widmore was telling the truth, that her name was crossed off on the cave wall. Then the power gets shut off.
Somebody killed the power.
And Cerberus can be heard. It exterminates Widmore's crew, and then Jack comes by and unlocks his pals from the cage. They head towards the plane to meet up with Locke, as Jack tells Kate that he'll help them escape, but that he isn't meant to go. So we go to Locke the next day, heading towards the plane and being shot at by Widmore's guys. As we know, Flock is invincible, or they just have really bad aim. Locke snaps one guy's neck and then shoots the other. Then he takes his watch, like, to sell on Craigslist later or something. He goes into the plane and sees that it's rigged with C4 explosives. I see a lot of people thinking that Richard, Miles, and Ben were the ones to rig the plane, but that doesn't make sense because Richard knows that you can't kill the man in black like that. He just wanted to stop the man in black from leaving the island, so why wouldn't he just set off the explosives instead of rigging it? Some people also thought it was the man in black who rigged the plane, but that doesn't really make sense because he didn't know where the bomb was on the plane. That leaves the obvious answer, Widmore. I mean, he had his guards there after all. Now, I don't think he was trying to kill the man in black. He knows how tough it would be to bring him down, so the only possibility is that he wanted to kill the candidates. This makes me think that he could have his own agenda that's in line with the man in black's, or maybe even working with him, but I'll talk about that at the end though. Jack and friends arrive at the plane and Locke comes out, telling them that he killed the two guys outside, but that Widmore knew he would kill them, otherwise he wouldn't have removed his little sonic fences. He shows them the C4 and explains that Widmore wants them all to be in a confined space to kill them all, which the man in black also wants as well, as we'll see later, but he doesn't tell them. So he says that they need to leave in the submarine now. As they head off, Sawyer whispers to Jack that he doesn't trust that thing and asks Jack to make sure it doesn't get on the sub. At the docks, there's no sign of Widmore's men, so Sawyer draws up a plan and some of them enter the sub first, where they easily overtake it and tell the captain to get ready to dive. Then when Jack, Claire, and Saeed go towards the sub, Flock gives Jack a backpack and asks him to reconsider his decision of staying on the island because whoever told Jack to stay had no idea what he was talking about. But Jack says to Flock that John Locke told him to stay and pushes Flock into the water. Kate turns around to see what happened, but she's shot by one of Widmore's men. So Jack carries Kate into the sub, leaving Claire and Flock by themselves to fend off Widmore's guys. And when Flock turns to look at the sub, Sawyer closes the hatch door, leaving the man in black and Claire outside. When Claire tries to run to the sub after she realizes that she's once again been left behind, Flock grabs her and says with a look of pleasure, "Trust me, you don't want to be on that sub." Inside of the submarine, Jack yells to Hurley to grab a first aid kit for Kate, but he comes back saying there isn't one. Then what's this, Hurley? So Jack gets his backpack and finds the C4 inside, along with the watch from Widmore's guard, counting down from 3:54. Jack realizes what's happening and tells them all that they did exactly what Locke wanted them to do, and that Locke wanted to be left behind. The man in black wanted them to find the bomb without a way to escape, so that's why he strapped the watch to the bomb that he found from the guard. I bet the timer was bogus and didn't mean anything, just trying to make them feel like they had to do something. He just wanted them to try and disarm it. The man in black can't set his own traps to kill the candidates. They have to willingly do a task which will kill themselves. We know that the man in black was Christian sometimes on the island earlier. Back in season 1, he tried to kill Jack when, disguised as Christian, he led Jack to the side of a cliff, which would have been Jack killing himself and not the man physically killing him.